November 30th, 1939, Finland. A nation of 3.7 million people. Soviet forces cross the border. Nearly 1 million soldiers, thousands of tanks, hundreds of aircraft. The invasion is supposed to be easy, rapid, a quick conquest. Finland will be defeated in weeks, maybe days. Stalin is confident. The Red Army is vastly superior. Finland has no chance. The setup, Stalin's demands. Stalin fears Nazi Germany. Germany shares a border with Finland. A border only 20 miles from Leningrad, now St. Petersburg. Stalin wants a buffer zone. Wants the Finnish border moved westward. Stalin demands the Karelian Isthmus. Strategic territory on the border. Stalin also demands islands in the Gulf of Finland. A 30-year lease on the Hanko Peninsula for a naval base. In exchange, Stalin offers Soviet territory elsewhere. The offers are rejected. Finland refuses to give up territory. Finnish defiance. The Finnish government refuses Stalin's terms. Refuses to surrender territory. Finland is small, but Finland is independent. Finland refuses to become a Soviet puppet. The refusal is courageous, but it leads to war. The pre-war buildup. Stalin prepares for invasion. Soviet forces mobilize on the Finnish border. Soviet divisions are positioned. Soviet tanks are assembled. Soviet aircraft are prepared. Finnish forces mobilize, secretly, disguised as refresher training. Marshal Carl Gustaf Mannerheim commands Finnish forces. Mannerheim is experienced. Professional, respected. Mannerheim understands the situation. Finland is vastly outnumbered. Mannerheim's strategy, defense. Not offense, the goal, survive. Not win, the Mannerheim Line. Mannerheim constructs the Mannerheim Line. A defensive fortification system. The line stretches across the Karelian Isthmus, about 85 miles long, from the Gulf of Finland to Lake Ladoga. The construction began in the 1920s. Has been ongoing for 2 decades. By 1939, the line is incomplete, but it is formidable. The line consists of concrete bunkers with machine gun positions, anti-tank guns positioned to cover approach routes, minefields to slow tanks, trenches for infantry defense, tank obstacles and ditches, multiple defense lines in depth. The line is designed for delay, not to repel invasion permanently, but the line is the only chance Finland has. The ice fields of Finland. Finland has harsh geography. Forests, lakes, swamps. Winter is brutal. Temperatures drop to 40 degrees Fahrenheit, sometimes lower. Soviet forces are not prepared for this. Soviet soldiers come from warmer climates. Soviet uniforms are inadequate for Finnish winter. Soviet vehicles struggle in snow. But Finnish forces are adapted. Finnish soldiers are trained for winter warfare, trained for forest fighting. The Soviet invasion begins. November 30th, 1939. Soviet forces attack. The invasion comes from the south, Karelian Isthmus. From the east, across lakes and borders. From the north, toward Oulu. The Soviet objective, rapid conquest. Destroy Finnish forces, occupy Finland, install a puppet government. Soviet confidence is high. The Red Army is all-powerful. Finland will fall quickly. Soviet initial advantages. The Soviets have overwhelming numerical superiority. 1 million soldiers versus 250,000 Finnish defenders. 2,500 plus tanks versus 100 Finnish tanks, mostly older models. 2,500 plus aircraft versus 100 Finnish aircraft. Artillery superiority, 10-1 advantage. The Soviets should overwhelm Finland. The numbers suggest easy victory, but numbers alone don't determine warfare. Initial Soviet setbacks. Soviet forces attack the Mannerheim Line. The attacks are frontal, infantry assaults, tank charges, artillery bombardment. But Soviet attacks fail. Repeatedly, Finnish defenders hold. Artillery fire from prepared positions. Soviet tanks become bogged down. Finnish anti-tank guns destroy Soviet tanks. Soviet infantry attacks are repulsed. Machine gun fire from bunkers counterattacks by Finnish reserves. The Soviet advance is slow, difficult, costly. Soviet morale collapse. Soviet soldiers are exhausted. Casualties are mounting. Soviet soldiers are unprepared for winter. Uniforms are inadequate. Supplies are stretched. Soviet soldiers are poorly motivated. Many are conscripts, forced into the army. Soviet soldiers have heard reports of Finland's ferocity, reports of soldiers not surrendering, reports of losses. Morale in Soviet ranks is declining, but the line is the only chance Finland has. The ice fields of Finland. Finland has harsh geography. Forests, lakes, swamps. Winter is brutal. Temperatures drop to 40 degrees Fahrenheit, sometimes lower. Soviet forces are not prepared for this. Soviet soldiers come from warmer climates. Soviet uniforms are inadequate for Finnish winter. Soviet vehicles struggle in snow. But Finnish forces are adapted. Finnish soldiers are trained for winter warfare, trained for forest fighting. The Soviet invasion begins. November 30th, 1939. Soviet forces attack. The invasion comes from the south, Karelian Isthmus. From the east across lakes and borders. From the north toward Oulu. The Soviet objective, rapid conquest. Destroy Finnish forces, occupy Finland, install a puppet government. Soviet confidence is high. The Red Army is all-powerful. Finland will fall quickly. Soviet initial advantages. The Soviets have overwhelming numerical superiority. 1 million soldiers versus 250,000 Finnish defenders. 2,500 plus tanks versus 100 Finnish tanks, mostly older models. 2,500 plus aircraft versus 100 Finnish aircraft. Artillery superiority, 10-1 advantage. The Soviets should overwhelm Finland. The numbers suggest easy victory, but numbers alone don't determine warfare. Initial Soviet setbacks. Soviet forces attack the Mannerheim Line. The attacks are frontal, infantry assaults, tank charges, artillery bombardment. But Soviet attacks fail. Repeatedly, Finnish defenders hold. Artillery fire from prepared positions. Soviet tanks become bogged down. Finnish anti-tank guns destroy Soviet tanks. Soviet infantry attacks are repulsed. Machine gun fire from bunkers counterattacks by Finnish reserves. The Soviet advance is slow, difficult, costly. Soviet morale collapse. Soviet soldiers are exhausted. Casualties are mounting. Soviet soldiers are unprepared for winter. Uniforms are inadequate. Supplies are stretched. Soviet soldiers are poorly motivated. Many are conscripts, forced into the army. Soviet soldiers have heard reports of Finland's ferocity, reports of soldiers not surrendering, reports of losses. Morale in Soviet ranks is declining, but the line is the only chance Finland has. The ice fields of Finland. Finland has harsh geography. Forests, lakes, swamps. Winter is brutal. Temperatures drop to 40 degrees Fahrenheit, sometimes lower. Soviet forces are not prepared for this. Soviet soldiers come from warmer climates. Soviet uniforms are inadequate for Finnish winter. Soviet vehicles struggle in snow. But Finnish forces are adapted. Finnish soldiers are trained for winter warfare, trained for forest fighting. The Soviet invasion begins. November 30th, 1939. Soviet forces attack. The invasion comes from the south, Karelian Isthmus. From the east across lakes and borders. From the north toward Oulu. The Soviet objective, rapid conquest. Destroy Finnish forces, occupy Finland, install a puppet government. Soviet confidence is high. The Red Army is all-powerful. Finland will fall quickly. Soviet initial advantages. The Soviets have overwhelming numerical superiority. 1 million soldiers versus 250,000 Finnish defenders. 2,500 plus tanks versus 100 Finnish tanks, mostly older models. 2,500 plus aircraft versus 100 Finnish aircraft. Artillery superiority, 10-1 advantage. The Soviets should overwhelm Finland. The numbers suggest easy victory, but numbers alone don't determine warfare. Initial Soviet setbacks. Soviet forces attack the Mannerheim Line. The attacks are frontal, infantry assaults, tank charges, artillery bombardment. But Soviet attacks fail. Repeatedly, Finnish defenders hold. Artillery fire from prepared positions. Soviet tanks become bogged down. Finnish anti-tank guns destroy Soviet tanks. Soviet infantry attacks are repulsed. Machine gun fire from bunkers counterattacks by Finnish reserves. The Soviet advance is slow, difficult, costly. Soviet morale collapse. Soviet soldiers are exhausted. Casualties are mounting. Soviet soldiers are unprepared for winter. Uniforms are inadequate. Supplies are stretched. Soviet soldiers are poorly motivated. Many are conscripts, forced into the army. Soviet soldiers have heard reports of Finland's ferocity, reports of soldiers not surrendering, reports of losses. Morale in Soviet ranks is declining. Finnish soldiers are defending their homeland, defending their families, defending their independence. Finnish soldiers know they are outnumbered, but they are motivated. Finnish soldiers are well adapted to winter, to forest fighting, to terrain. Finnish soldiers are well trained, professional, led by experienced officers. The determination of Finnish forces is evident. By December, the Soviet offensive stalls. Soviet forces have captured some territory, but breakthrough is not achieved. The Mannerheim Line is not broken. Soviet losses are mounting, casualties in tens of thousands. Finnish resistance is holding. The nation is not conquered, the world watches. The expectation was Soviet victory in weeks. But Finland is still fighting. The League of Nations condemns the Soviet invasion, declares it illegal, expels the Soviet Union from the League. The Western world is shocked. The mighty Soviet army is struggling against small Finland. Finland is celebrated as the underdog, the David fighting Goliath. But sympathy doesn't translate to military aid. Britain and France are unable to help directly. Sweden is neutral, sympathetic to Finland, but fearful of Soviet retaliation. Finland is largely alone. The Finnish morale is high. Finland is resisting, against odds. Soviet morale is declining. Victory is not coming. Losses are mounting. The battle is becoming a test of will, not just military strength. By end of December, the situation is clear. Soviet forces have not achieved breakthrough. The Mannerheim Line is holding. Soviet losses are unsustainable. The invasion is not succeeding as planned. The war is becoming a grinding attrition. Winter is intensifying. Cold is increasing. Soviet forces suffer from cold. Equipment freezes. Morale drops. Finnish forces are adapted. They manage the cold. They fight effectively. Winter is Finland's ally. The battle is becoming a stalemate, not a Soviet victory. Soviet forces have numbers, but not breakthrough. Finnish forces have limited resources, but holding the line. The first month has shown this war will not be quick. This war will be difficult for the Soviets. This war may not be winnable for the Soviets, on current terms. The underdog is surviving, defying expectations, creating military history. January 1940, the Winter War continues. Soviet forces attack, Finnish forces defend. The battle becomes more intense, more desperate, more costly. In northern Finland, the most dramatic Finnish victory unfolds. The Northern Front strategy. Northern Finland is vast, sparsely populated, heavily forested. The Soviet objective, capture the city of Oulu on the Gulf of Bothnia. Cut Finland in half, isolate northern Finland. The Soviet advance would be along the Raate Road. A narrow forest path, barely a road at all. Soviet planners assume rapid advance. The road connects to Soviet territory. Supply would be straightforward. But northern Finland is hostile terrain, and Finnish forces are there. The Battle of Suomussalmi, December 7, 1939. The Soviet 163rd Rifle Division captures Suomussalmi, a key town. The Soviet division is deep in Finnish territory. Supply lines are stretched. The division is vulnerable. Finnish forces under Colonel Hjalmar Siilasvuo recognize the opportunity. The Finnish plan, encircle the Soviet division. Cut off supply, destroy it piecemeal. Cutting the supply lines. Finnish forces cut the Raate Road, the main supply line to the Soviet 163rd. Soviet forces attempt to keep the supply line open. Futile attempts, the Finnish forces cut additional routes. The Soviet 163rd is being isolated. The encirclement is forming. The Soviet division is trapped. The encircled Soviet division. The Soviet 163rd is surrounded. Approximately 9,000 soldiers, in thick forest. In brutal cold, supply is cut. Ammunition is limited, food is scarce. The Soviets attempt breakout attacks, desperate attacks, futile attacks. Finnish forces systematically destroy Soviet attempt, position by position, company by company. The Soviet 44th Division relief. Soviet High Command decides to relieve the 163rd Division. The Soviet 44th Rifle Division is ordered to advance along the Raate Road. Break through to relieve the 163rd. The 44th Division is larger, approximately 17,500 soldiers, well equipped with tanks and artillery. The 44th should be able to push through Finnish resistance. Relieve the 163rd. Continue advance. The 44th should be able to push through Finnish resistance. Relieve the 163rd. Continue advance. The long column problem. The Raate Road is narrow, hemmed in by forest, deep snow. The Soviet 44th Division is forced to spread out in a long column, nearly 20 kilometers long. The column moves slowly. Bogged down by snow, by narrow road, the column is vulnerable, strung out, unable to defend as a unit. Finnish forces recognize the opportunity. The Finnish Motti tactics. The Finns employ a tactic called Motti, Finnish for chopped firewood. The tactic, cut the Soviet column in multiple places. Divide it into isolated segments. Attack each segment separately. Finnish forces cut the Raate Road in multiple locations. The Soviet column is divided. Soviet forces cannot move forward, cannot retreat, cannot move laterally into forests, too deep. Soviet forces are trapped on the road, vulnerable to Finnish attack. The frozen lake supply route. The Finns improvise a supply route over frozen lakes. Parallel to the Raate road, the Finns open a route over ice, allows Finnish resupply, allows Finnish movement. The frozen lakes are only passable to light forces. Small units, not tanks, but Finnish forces need mobility more than firepower. The supply route gives Finns advantage. The Soviet losses accumulate. Soviet forces on the Raate road suffer casualties. Artillery fire, small arms fire. Ambushes. Soviet forces are cold, hungry, demoralized. Soviet forces attempt breakout. Most attempts fail. Casualties accumulate. Dead are left on the road. Wounded are abandoned. By early January, Soviet losses are catastrophic. The complete encirclement. January 4th, 8. January 4th, 1940. Finnish forces launch main assault. Attacks from north and south. Attacks along the road. Attacks from forests. Soviet forces are overrun. Defensive positions are breached. The Soviet 44th Division is completely encircled. Cut into multiple segments. Soviet commander realizes breakthrough is impossible. Retreat is impossible. Soviet forces are trapped. The systematic destruction. Finnish forces destroy the encircled Soviet segments. Soviet soldiers try to flee. Soviet disappear into forests, assaulted, overwhelmed, are killed or captured. Soviet soldiers attempt heroic last stands. They are overrun. One Soviet officer captured told his captors, "I never saw a Finn, but whenever my men left the road, they never returned." The casualty toll. The Soviet 44th Division is devastated. Approximately 9,000 casualties out of 7,500. Thousands killed, thousands wounded. Thousands missing or captured. Soviet tanks are destroyed. Soviet guns are abandoned. Soviet supplies are captured. The division ceases to exist as a fighting unit. The division is destroyed. The overall Suomussalmi result. Both the Soviet 163rd and 44th Divisions are destroyed or shattered. Combined Soviet losses, approximately 25,000, 30,000 casualties. Finnish losses, approximately 400 to 500 casualties. The ratio, 50-1, Soviet to Finnish losses. This is extraordinary. This is unprecedented. The military significance. The victory at Suomussalmi shows Finnish tactical superiority in forest warfare, Finnish ability to use terrain effectively, Finnish ability to defeat Soviet forces in detail, Soviet vulnerability in mobile warfare, Soviet command failures. The victory becomes legend, inspires Finnish forces, terrifies Soviet soldiers. The psychological impact. News of Suomussalmi spreads. Throughout Finland, throughout Scandinavia, throughout the world, Finland has defeated the Red Army, not temporarily, but completely. Finnish morale soars. The underdog has won decisively. Soviet morale plummets. The Red Army is not invincible, can be defeated. The northern offensive halted. The Soviet advance toward Oulu stops, with the destruction of the 44th and 163rd Divisions. The Soviet objective, cutting Finland in half, is abandoned. Soviet forces in the north assume defensive posture. Defensive Finland has won the northern front. The sniper, Simo Häyhä. During the fighting in the northern forests, a sniper emerges. Simo Häyhä, a farm boy from near the Russian border. Häyhä is skilled in shooting, skilled in hunting, skilled in moving silently through forests. Häyhä dresses in white camouflage, melts into the snow. Invisible. Häyhä carries a Mosin Nagant rifle. No scope iron sights only. Exceptional marksman. Häyhä moves through the forests, kills Soviet soldiers. Soviet soldiers don't see him, hear him, but soldiers disappear. The White Death legend. Soviet soldiers fear Häyhä, call him White Death. Häyhä kills with incredible accuracy, at distance. In daylight, Soviet soldiers become paranoid, afraid to move, afraid to expose themselves. Häyhä becomes a legend, a symbol of Finnish skill, Finnish adaptation, Finnish will to fight. The confirmed kills. Over 100 days, from December through early March, Häyhä kills at least 505 confirmed enemy soldiers. Some estimates put the total higher, 600, 700 kills with all weapons combined. He is the deadliest sniper in modern history. Unmatched. Häyhä's techniques. Häyhä doesn't use a scope. Scopes reflect light, make position obvious. He uses iron sights, relies on marksmanship, relies on distance. He wears white camouflage, matches the snow exactly, becomes invisible. He uses limited ammunition, takes long time between shots, waits for perfect opportunity. He focuses on officers, snipers, machine gunners, high-value targets. Häyhä's daily routine. Häyhä moves through forests with a day's worth of ammunition. He positions himself in snowy terrain, waits, Soviet soldiers appear. Häyhä fires but kills. 1 shot, 2 shots, 3 shots, but with devastating accuracy. Häyhä withdraws, moves to new position, repeats. In 1 day, Häyhä kills 25 Soviet soldiers. Soviet forces try to counter Häyhä, send their own snipers, send scout squads, send patrols, none succeed. Soviet snipers are killed, patrols disappear. Soviet forces eventually assign a sniper, named Raskovich, specifically to kill Häyhä. Specific assignment. But Raskovich is also killed. By Häyhä, Soviet forces cannot stop Häyhä, cannot eliminate him, cannot even locate him reliably. Häyhä kills at least 505 confirmed soldiers, possibly hundreds more. Häyhä forces Soviet forces to take defensive postures, to avoid movement, to limit operations. Häyhä exemplifies Finnish skill, adaptation will. Häyhä becomes symbol of Finnish resistance. March 6, 1940, late in the war. Häyhä is sniping near Kolla. Soviet forces launch counterattack, heavy assault. Häyhä is caught in the fighting. An explosive bullet hits Häyhä in the left jaw, shatters his face, causes severe wound. Häyhä loses consciousness, is carried to hospital by comrades. The war ends before Häyhä recovers. He lays in coma as armistice is signed. Häyhä survives, but with severe facial scarring, chronic pain. Häyhä will live until 2002. Age 96, will see the Soviet Union he fought against collapse. By end of January, Soviet forces have not achieved breakthrough. The Mannerheim Line still holds. Soviet losses are in hundreds of thousands, casualties. Finnish forces have won northern campaign. Finnish forces have won tactical victories. Soviet forces are being replaced. New commanders, Semyon Timoshenko replaces Kliment Voroshilov. The war is entering new phase. The Soviets change strategy, shift approach. The war intensifies in February. February 1940. The Winter War enters new phase. Soviet command has changed. General Kliment Voroshilov, failed, is replaced by General Semyon Timoshenko, promising. Timoshenko studies the northern victories, studies the Mannerheim Line defenses. Timoshenko realizes the old Soviet tactics are failing. Frontal assaults, massed infantry attacks. Timoshenko develops new strategy. Massive firepower, combined arms coordination. The strategy? Overwhelm defenses with artillery. Then assault with coordinated armor and infantry. The Soviet strategic change. Stalin is impatient. Victory must come, Finland must be conquered. Stalin commits more forces, more tanks, more artillery, more aircraft. Soviet resources are being massively committed. The Soviets will attempt breakthrough at the Mannerheim Line. The objective, smash through the line. Advance to Helsinki, end the war. The Mannerheim Line defenses. The Mannerheim Line consists of multiple defensive layers. The main line, strongest, bunkers, anti-tank guns, machine gun positions. A support line behind the main line. For secondary defense, reserve positions deeper back. For counterattack, for withdrawing forces. The line stretches 85 miles, from Gulf of Finland to Lake Ladoga. The strongest sector, Suma area, where 41 reinforced concrete bunkers exist. Soviet artillery bombardment. February 11th. The peace negotiations begin late February 1940. Finnish government opens peace negotiations with Soviet Union. The negotiations are in Stockholm, conducted by Finnish diplomats. Finland seeks to end the war before it's completely conquered. Soviet demands are severe. Cession of the Karelian Isthmus, including Viipuri. Cession of islands in the Gulf of Finland. Cession of territory around Lake Ladoga. Lease of the Hanko Peninsula for 30 years for Soviet naval base. These demands are harsh, but Finland's options are limited. The Soviet forces continue advancing, putting pressure on negotiations. Viipuri is surrounded. The city is under siege. Soviet forces are advancing toward Helsinki. The pressure on negotiators is immense. The negotiation reality: Finland has two choices. 1. Surrender all demands, accept Soviet terms. 2. Continue fighting, lose more territory, lose more soldiers, eventually surrender anyway. The difference: accepting now saves lives, continuing extends suffering. The agreement. After days of negotiation, agreement is reached. March 12, 1940, the Moscow Peace Treaty is signed. Finland accepts Soviet demands. Cedes Karelian Isthmus, approximately 9% of Finnish territory. Cedes Islands in the Gulf of Finland. Cedes territory around Lake Ladoga. Leases Hanko Peninsula for 30 years. In exchange, Soviet Union recognizes Finnish independence. Finland is not annexed. Finland remains independent, technically. The territorial loss: Finland loses approximately 11% of its territory, about 23,000 square kilometers. The losses include Karelia region, including Viipuri, Finland's second largest city, islands in Gulf of Finland, territory on eastern border, use of Hanko Peninsula. Approximately 400,000–500,000 Finns are forced to evacuate. They lose homes, become refugees. The treaty significance: the Moscow Peace Treaty marks the end of the Winter War. March 13, 1940, armistice goes into effect. The fighting ceases. The war is over. Finland has survived. The nation is independent. But Finland has suffered. Lost territory, lost soldiers, lost homes. The casualty toll: Finnish casualties: approximately 25,000 killed, 43,000 wounded, 1,000 missing. Soviet casualties: estimates vary. Conservative estimates: 150,000 plus casualties, killed, wounded, missing. Some estimates put Soviet losses higher, 300,000 plus casualties. The ratio: Soviet losses are 6 to 12 times higher than Finnish losses. Despite Soviet numerical superiority, Soviet losses are catastrophic. The international reaction: the League of Nations condemns Soviet invasion, expels Soviet Union from the League. The world is amazed. The mighty Soviet army took over 3 months to conquer small Finland. Finland is celebrated as a heroic nation, fought against overwhelming odds. Finland is labeled David defeating Goliath. The Soviet conclusion: Soviet dictator Stalin views the war as victory. Finland is defeated, territory is gained. But Soviet leaders privately recognize the war was more difficult than expected. Nikita Khrushchev later writes, "All of us, and Stalin first and foremost, sensed in our victory a defeat by the Finns. It was a dangerous defeat because it encouraged our enemy's conviction that the Soviet Union was a colossus with feet of clay." The German leadership takes note. If Soviet army struggled against Finland, Soviet army might be weaker than believed. This belief will influence Hitler's decision to invade Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa, in June 1941. The continuation war: the Moscow Peace Treaty is supposed to end the war permanently. But the territorial losses infuriate Finnish population, especially those evacuated. Finland harbors resentment. Finland wants the lost territories back. In June 1941, when Germany invades Soviet Union, Finland joins the war, continuation war. Finland attempts to reclaim the lost territories. But that is another story. The Winter War's legacy. The Winter War is Finland's finest hour, a nation resisting impossible odds. The Winter War shows courage and skill can partially overcome numerical disadvantage. The Winter War demonstrates Soviet military is not invincible, contrary to expectations. The Winter War is studied in military academies worldwide, as example of defensive warfare, as example of terrain utilization, as example of morale's importance. The Winter War is remembered in Finland as triumph. Despite losses, the nation survived. The Winter War ended March 13, 1940, but the consequences echoed across Europe, across the world, across history. The Finnish recovery. Finland emerges from the Winter War exhausted, traumatized but independent. Finland is the only nation to fight Soviet Union and maintain independence. The Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, were defeated earlier. Occupied by Soviets, will be annexed. Finland is different. Finland survives as nation. The evacuee crisis. Approximately 450,000 Finns must evacuate from ceded territories. These are not soldiers, these are civilians. Families, children, elderly, they lose homes, lose property, lose ancestral lands. The evacuation is traumatic. The refugees must resettle in remaining Finland. The resettlement program. The Finnish government implements resettlement program. Evacuees receive compensation, not full compensation, but something. Land is confiscated from non-evacuee owners, distributed to evacuee families. New farms, new homes, new lives rebuilt in remaining Finland. The program is not perfect, but it works. Finland survives the refugee crisis, the military aftermath. The Finnish army is demobilized, reduced in size, but the army is respected. The soldiers are honored. The soldiers have shown skill, bravery, determination. The economic impact. Finland's economy is severely impacted. The ceded territories included industrial areas, agricultural areas, economically productive areas. Finland loses approximately 10% of productive capacity. Finland must rebuild, must recover economically. The Soviet failures analyzed. The Soviet leadership analyzes the Winter War. Soviet commanders recognized the old tactics failed. Soviet commanders recommend military reforms, better training, better equipment, better tactics, better coordination. The Soviet military implements reforms. Months before the next war with Germany. The international implications. The Winter War implications are significant. Germany observes Soviet difficulties. German military attachés report, Soviet military is not as strong as believed. German generals conclude Soviet Union is beatable. This belief influences Hitler's decision to invade Soviet Union. The belief proves incorrect, but the belief exists. The Winter War contributes to German invasion of Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa. The hidden historical influence. The Winter War makes Hitler more confident in German military. Hitler believes Soviet Union can be defeated. Hitler plans Operation Barbarossa. Invasion of Soviet Union in June 1941. The operation is planned on assumption that Soviet Union is weaker than it is. If Hitler had understood Soviet strength shown by later Eastern Front, perhaps Hitler wouldn't have invaded. The Winter War's apparent Soviet weakness encourages German aggression. June 1941, Germany invades Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa. Finland, resenting territorial losses, aligns with Germany. The continuation war begins. Finland attacks Soviet Union. Finland attempts to reclaim lost territories. Finland succeeds in reclaiming some territories, but not all. Marshal Mannerheim is Finland's greatest hero. Mannerheim led Finland through Winter War. Then through continuation war, Mannerheim's defense strategy worked. The nation survived. Mannerheim is respected internationally, even by military enemies. The Mannerheim Line becomes case study in defensive warfare. The lesson: prepared defensive positions can delay or frustrate attacks. The lesson: knowledge of terrain is valuable. The lesson: morale and determination matter. Military academies worldwide study the Winter War. The Winter War becomes legend. A small nation defeats a larger nation. Finland becomes symbol of resistance, of determination, of not surrendering despite odds. The Winter War inspires other small nations, shows that resistance is possible. After the continuation war ends, September 1944, new negotiations occur. Finland must again negotiate with Soviet Union. Finland must again cede territory. The Karelian question, reclaiming lost territory, becomes political issue in Finland. The question remains unsettled, even today. After the war, Finland and Soviet Union have wary relationship. Finland is independent, but Soviet Union is powerful neighbor. Finland pursues Finlandization, balancing between West and Soviet Union. Finland maintains independence, but is cautious toward Soviet power. Simo Häyhä becomes Finnish national hero, the sniper who killed 500-plus enemy soldiers. The White Death, Häyhä's legend grows, becomes symbol of Finnish skill, Finnish determination. Häyhä lives until 2002. Age 96, sees Soviet Union collapse. Häyhä becomes living link to Winter War history. The Winter War teaches military lessons. 1. Preparation matters. Mannerheim Line preparation slowed Soviet advance. Terrain matters. Finnish terrain advantages helped Finnish defense. 3. Morale matters. Finnish determination exceeded Soviet motivation. 4. Tactics matter. Soviet frontal assaults failed until tactics changed. 5. Coordination matters. Soviet combined arms approach eventually worked. 6. Adaptation matters. Mannerheim adapted. Timoshenko adapted. Leadership matters. Mannerheim's leadership was superior to early Soviet commanders. The political lessons. The Winter War teaches political lessons. 1. Small nations can survive against larger neighbors. 2. International support, even if indirect, matters. 3. Diplomacy can end conflicts before total destruction. 4. Maintaining independence is possible despite pressure. The psychological lessons. The Winter War shows: 1. Human determination exceeds material advantage sometimes. 2. Will to fight influences outcomes. Fear can affect larger forces. Soviet fear of snipers, of terrain, of Finnish tactics. 4. Symbols matter. Häyhä, Mannerheim, the Mannerheim Line itself. The historical significance. The Winter War is significant because: 1. It showed Soviet military was not invincible. It influenced German decision to invade Soviet Union. 3. It demonstrated defensive warfare effectiveness. 4. It showed small nation can resist large power. 5. It inspired other nations facing military pressure. The territorial consequences. The territories lost in Winter War and Continuation War are never returned to Finland. Karelia remains Soviet and Russian territory to this day. The loss is permanent. The territorial loss motivates Finnish determination to remain independent. The loss explains Finnish caution toward Russia even today. The modern relevance. The Winter War remains relevant today. When Russia invaded Ukraine, 2022, commentators referenced Winter War. Ukraine's resistance echoes Finnish determination. The Winter War shows small nations can resist large powers. The historical memory. The Winter War is remembered in Finland as 1. A national triumph despite defeat. 2. An example of courage and determination. 3. A moment of national unity. 4. An inspiration to continue fighting. The war creates Finnish national identity. The identity, independence, determination, resistance to larger power. The international perspective. Outside Finland, the Winter War is remembered as 1. David versus Goliath story. 2. Example of effective defensive warfare. 3. Demonstration of Soviet military weakness. 4. Historical turning point influencing Germany's invasion. The Winter War is studied in military academies worldwide. Military officers study Mannerheim Line tactics, Soviet frontal assault failures, Soviet adaptation and eventual success, Finnish mobile defense, Motti tactics, sniper tactics, Häyhä. The Winter War is not just history, it's military instruction. The Soviet Union views Winter War as 1. Military victory, territory gained. 2. Strategic failure, took too long, cost too much. 3. Tactical lesson, adaptation necessary. 4. Political failure, Finland remained independent. The Soviets gain territory but lose prestige internationally. The Winter War demonstrates danger of underestimating enemy. Soviets underestimated Finland, assumed quick victory. The underestimation cost Soviet lives, delayed victory. The lesson, always estimate enemy capability carefully. The Winter War is beginning of W2 Eastern Front. The Winter War precedes German invasion of Soviet Union by 16 months. The Winter War shows Germans. Soviet military can be challenged. The Winter War is part of larger Eastern Front story. The Winter War, 105 days, determined. 1. Finland's future as independent nation. 2. Soviet military's true capabilities. 3. German military's confidence in defeating Soviet Union. 4. The role of defense, terrain, and morale in warfare. 5. The possibility of smaller nation resisting larger power. The Winter War's consequences echoed through WW2, through the Cold War, through modern history. A small nation's decision to resist. A few months of fighting changed the course of European history. The Winter War remains example of human determination, of courage against odds, of the power of defensive positioning. The Winter War is historical turning point, not because of military victory, but because of the lessons learned. The precedent set, the inspiration provided. Finland survived, and in surviving showed the world resistance is possible. Independence is achievable. Small nations can matter. The Winter War is Finland's finest hour, a moment of glory in a small nation's struggle for survival. The final phase of the Winter War is dominated by one city. Viipuri, Viborg in Russian, is Finland's second largest city, a symbol of Finnish culture, of Finnish independence. Viipuri is located on the Karelian Isthmus, in the path of Soviet advance. The city is about to fall. The city will be defended desperately. The city will become the final battleground. The Viipuri strategic importance. Viipuri is not just a city. It is a symbol. Viipuri has been Finnish for centuries. Before that, it was contested between Finland and Russia. Viipuri represents Finnish identity, Finnish heritage, Finnish culture. Viipuri is also strategically important. It is a port city, a major city on the isthmus. The Soviets want Viipuri. The Finns want to keep it. The population. Viipuri has approximately 70,000 residents before the war. These are civilians, families, children, elderly. The civilians are about to experience urban warfare, bombardment siege. The fortifications. The Mannerheim Line extends through the Viipuri region. The city itself is fortified. Barricades, anti-tank obstacles. Machine gun positions. The fortifications are extensive, but are incomplete. The Finnish defenders prepare for siege. The Soviet advance toward Viipuri. As the Mannerheim Line breaks, early to mid-February, Soviet forces advance toward Viipuri. Soviet forces attack from multiple directions. The city is being encircled. The encirclement is tightening. By mid-February, Viipuri is threatened with complete encirclement. The evacuation begins. The Finnish government orders civilian evacuation. Approximately 50,000 civilians are evacuated from the city. The evacuation is chaotic. Families are separated. Belongings are left behind. The evacuees flee west, toward safety, away from Soviet advance. The evacuation continues for weeks. The defenders remain. The Finnish defenders remain in Viipuri. Approximately 15,000, 20,000 Finnish soldiers are positioned in and around the city. These soldiers know the city will fall, know they are facing overwhelming Soviet forces, but they defend anyway, to slow Soviet advance, to buy time. The world watches Viipuri's fall. The city falls, but Finland fights on. International respect for Finnish determination increases. The underdog nation refuses to surrender completely. After Viipuri's fall, the fighting continues for another 2 to 3 weeks. Soviet forces advance further. Finnish forces establish new defenses. The defenses are eventually broken or bypassed. By early March, the fighting begins to wind down. The momentum is with the Soviets, but Finnish forces are not defeated. As Soviet forces advance, the pressure for peace negotiations increases. The Finnish government realizes military victory is impossible. The question becomes how to end the war with minimum additional losses. Peace negotiations accelerate. Early March 1940. Soviet forces launch final major offensive. The objective: push Finnish forces further west. Capture more territory. Soviet forces attack across broad fronts. Finnish forces attempt to resist. Attempt to hold defensive lines. But the lines cannot be held indefinitely. Finnish forces are depleted. Casualties have mounted. Reserves are nearly exhausted. New conscripts are being trained. The manpower situation is becoming critical. Finland cannot sustain the war much longer. Finnish leadership recognizes the war cannot continue. Marshal Mannerheim advises the government, accept Soviet peace terms. The decision is made. Finland will negotiate peace. The armistice acceptance, March 12, 1940. Finland accepts Soviet peace terms. The Moscow Peace Treaty is signed. The armistice goes into effect March 13, 1940. The Winter War is over. The Viipuri loss finalized. The Moscow Peace Treaty confirms Viipuri remains Soviet. The Karelian Isthmus, including Viipuri, is ceded to Soviet Union. The loss is permanent. The people of Viipuri become refugees. Finland survives, but Finland loses Viipuri forever. The mixed emotions. The end of war brings mixed emotions. Relief. The fighting is over. The dying stops. Devastation. The lost territory. The lost cities. The evacuees. Determination. Finland will rebuild. Finland will survive. The final assessment of Viipuri's fall is militarily significant. It represents breakthrough of Mannerheim Line. Viipuri's fall is symbolically devastating. It represents loss of Finnish culture. But Viipuri's fall is not the end of Finland. Finland survives. The evacuation of Viipuri's people is successful. The people are saved. The city is lost. But the people survive. They will rebuild elsewhere. The Moscow Peace Treaty, signed March 12, 1940, ends the Winter War. But the treaty is not the end of the story. The treaty is the beginning of new chapters. The consequences of the treaty ripple across Europe, across the world, across history. The treaty terms. The Moscow Peace Treaty requires Finland to 1. Cede the entire Karelian Isthmus, including Viipuri. 2. Cede islands in the Gulf of Finland. 3. Cede territory around Lake Ladoga. 4. Lease the Hanko Peninsula for 30 years to the Soviet Union. In exchange, Soviet Union recognizes Finnish independence. Finland is not annexed. Finland survives as independent nation, but loses territory. The territorial redistribution. Finland loses approximately 11% of its land area, about 23,000 square kilometers. The lost territories include Viipuri, second largest city, rich forests and agricultural lands, industrial areas, cultural centers. The loss is significant economically, significant strategically, significant psychologically. The evacuees. Approximately 450,000 Finns must evacuate from ceded territories. These people lose everything: homes, property, ancestral lands. The evacuation is forced. The people have days to leave. The evacuation is traumatic. Families are separated, children cry. The evacuees leave everything behind, move west into remaining Finland. Of the resettlement challenges. Finland must accommodate 450,000 refugees. Finland's total population is only 3.7 million. The refugees are 12% of the total population. The resettlement challenge is enormous. Housing is scarce, employment is difficult, resources are limited, but Finland manages. The nation adapts. The government response. The Finnish government implements resettlement programs. Land is confiscated from non-evacuees, distributed to evacuees. Compensation is provided, though not full compensation. New communities are built, new towns are established. The resettlement is not perfect, but it works. The Hanko Peninsula Lease. The 30-year lease of Hanko Peninsula is particularly humiliating. Hanko is only 35 kilometers from Helsinki, Finland's capital. The Soviet Union will establish a military base, a threat to Helsinki. The lease means Soviet military is now on Finnish territory. The lease is a symbol of Finnish subordination. The Soviet military presence. With the Hanko lease, Soviet military moves into Finnish territory. Soviet troops occupy Hanko. Soviet naval base is established. Soviet aircraft operate from Hanko. Soviet military presence is felt in Finland, a constant reminder of Soviet power. The Finnish resentment. The treaty terms create resentment among Finns. The people blame the government for not fighting harder, for surrendering. The losses are painful. Viipuri especially is mourned. The resentment festers. The resentment will influence future decisions. The national trauma. The evacuation creates national trauma. Families are torn apart, homes are lost, lives are disrupted. The trauma affects the entire society. The trauma creates identity. Finnish identity becomes about resistance, about survival despite losses. The economic impact. The economic impact of losing 11% of territory is significant. Lost industrial capacity, lost agricultural production, lost trade. Finland's economy is damaged, but not destroyed. Finland must rebuild economically, must adapt to smaller territory. The Soviet assessment. The Soviet Union views the treaty as victory. Territory is gained, the threat from western border is reduced. But Soviet leaders recognize the victory is incomplete. Finland is not conquered. Finland is not annexed. Finland remains independent. The German military observers watch the Winter War carefully. Germany sees Soviet army struggle against Finland. Germany's assessment. Soviet military is weaker than expected. The assessment will influence German decision to invade Soviet Union. The assessment will prove incorrect, but the belief exists. The hidden strategic consequence. The Winter War demonstrates Soviet military weaknesses. But the Winter War also demonstrates Soviet willingness to persist. Soviet forces eventually break through, eventually achieve objectives. The lesson: the Soviet Union is beatable. But it will be difficult. The diplomatic victory. Finland achieves diplomatic victory despite military defeat. Finland maintains independence. Finland avoids annexation. Poland, Baltic states were not so fortunate. They were annexed. Finland's diplomatic skill preserves national independence. The international community sympathizes with Finland. Finland fought bravely against overwhelming odds. The League of Nations condemns Soviet invasion. Expels Soviet Union. International respect for Finland increases. But sympathy doesn't translate to military assistance. Sympathy is all Finland receives. The Baltic states contrast. The Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, also face Soviet invasion. But the Baltic states are annexed, incorporated into Soviet Union. Finland's fate is different. Finland retains independence. The difference is partly luck, partly skill, partly geography. Finland is farther from Soviet heartland, has better defensive terrain, has more determined leadership. The continued Finnish vulnerability. Despite the treaty, Finland remains vulnerable. Soviet military base is on Finnish territory, Hanko. Soviet Union is still present, still powerful. Finland must navigate between German and Soviet power, carefully. The rearmament question. After the treaty, Finland faces question: should Finland rearm? The answer eventually is yes. Finland begins rebuilding military, preparing for next conflict. The conflict will come in June 1941. The Soviet-Finnish border. The new Finnish-Soviet border is shorter, more defensible. The loss of Karelian Isthmus means loss of buffer zone, but the remaining territory is still defensible. The new border will be the site of future fighting. The population displacement legacy. The 450,000 evacuees create lasting impact on Finnish society. The evacuees are resettled, but the trauma remains. The evacuee families maintain identity, maintain memory of lost homeland. The displacement becomes part of Finnish national memory. The displacement is remembered, the losses are mourned. The territorial loss permanence. The Moscow Peace Treaty is not a temporary arrangement. The ceded territories are lost permanently. After WE ends, the territories are not returned. After Soviet Union collapses, the territories are not returned. The loss is permanent. Even today, Karelia remains Russian. The treaty's historical significance. The Moscow Peace Treaty is significant because 1. It ends the Winter War. 2. It preserves Finnish independence, unlike Baltic states. It demonstrates Soviet determination and adaptability. 4. It influences German calculations about Soviet strength. 5. It creates 450,000 Finnish refugees. 6. It establishes pattern of Soviet-Finnish relations. The treaty shapes not just Finland's future, but European history, the continuing Finnish-Soviet tension. The treaty creates lasting tension between Finland and Soviet Union. Finland resents the losses. Finland desires to reclaim territories. Soviet Union remains powerful neighbor, always present threat. The relationship is wary, is conditional, is based on balance of power. Finland will carefully navigate Soviet power for 45 years until Soviet collapse. The path to continuation war. The resentment created by the treaty will lead to next conflict. In June 1941, Germany invades Soviet Union. Finland, seeing opportunity to reclaim lost territories, joins the war. The continuation war begins. Finland attempts to recover lost Karelia. But that is another chapter of Finnish history. The Winter War ends, but the lessons learned shape the future. The lessons affect military doctrine, strategy, tactics, understanding of warfare. The lessons are studied in military academies worldwide. The lessons influence military thinking for decades. The Motti tactic legacy. The Motti tactic, cutting supply lines, dividing enemy into segments, becomes recognized doctrine. Finnish success with Motti tactics shows the effectiveness of the strategy. Military academies worldwide study the Motti tactics. The tactic is incorporated into military training. Military doctrine, the tactic remains relevant today. Modern militaries study Motti tactics. The defensive doctrine lessons. The Mannerheim Line demonstrates defensive doctrine effectiveness. Prepared defensive positions delay and frustrate offensive attacks. Multiple defensive lines are better than single line. Defensive depth allows flexibility, allows retreat without collapse. Modern military doctrine incorporates these lessons. The artillery dominance recognition. The Winter War shows the power of artillery. Soviet artillery bombardment eventually breaks Finnish defenses. The lesson, overwhelming artillery can overcome defensive positions. The lesson, defense against artillery requires dispersion, requires protection. Artillery dominance is recognized as crucial element of warfare. The armor vulnerability in winter. Soviet tanks struggle in Finnish winter. In forest terrain, tanks are vulnerable to anti-tank guns. To dedicated infantrymen, tank doctrine is revised. Tanks require infantry support, require coordination. The lesson, technology alone doesn't determine warfare. The infantry importance recognition. The Winter War shows infantry remains crucial. Infantry captures ground. Infantry holds positions. Infantry fights in terrain. Tanks support infantry, but infantry is foundation. The lesson, infantry quality matters. Infantry training matters. Infantry remains essential component of military doctrine. The sniper effectiveness discovery. Simo Häyhä's effectiveness demonstrates sniper value. 500 plus confirmed kills by single sniper, without scope, with iron sights. The lesson, snipers can affect large-scale operations. Snipers can disrupt enemy operations, create fear, force defensive posture. Military training incorporates sniper training. Sniper doctrine develops. The morale, importance recognition. The Winter War demonstrates morale's crucial importance. Finnish morale is high. Soviet morale is low, initially. Finnish morale allows Finnish forces to exceed expected performance. Soviet morale eventually improves. Soviet forces eventually prevail. The lesson, morale is force multiplier. Morale can overcome material disadvantage, to a point. Importance demonstration. Marshal Mannerheim's leadership is crucial to Finnish survival. Mannerheim adapts strategy, positions reserves effectively. Maintains morale. Soviet leadership, Voroshilov, is poor initially. Soviet forces struggle. Soviet leadership, Timoshenko, is better. Soviet forces succeed. The lesson: leadership quality affects military outcomes. Leadership matters enormously. The terrain utilization learning. The Winter War shows terrain is powerful multiplier. Finnish knowledge of terrain allows Finnish advantages. Soviet unfamiliarity with terrain causes Soviet disadvantages. The lesson: terrain knowledge is valuable military asset. The lesson: fighting on home terrain is advantage. The weather factor recognition. Winter becomes weapon. Finnish weapon against Soviet forces. Soviet soldiers suffer from cold. Equipment fails in cold. Finnish soldiers are adapted. Thrive in cold. Use cold as advantage. The lesson: weather affects military operations, can affect outcomes. The lesson: adaptation to environment matters. The adaptation imperative. The Winter War shows importance of adaptation. Soviets initially fail, then adapt, then succeed. Finns adapt continuously. Respond to Soviet changes, maintain effectiveness. The lesson: military must be able to adapt. Inflexible militaries fail. The lesson: adaptation speed matters. Quick adaptation wins. The combined arms doctrine. Soviet ultimate success comes from combined arms approach. Artillery, infantry armor, air support working together. The lesson: combined arms is requirement for military success. The lesson: coordination between branches is crucial. Combined arms doctrine becomes central to military thinking. The technology limits recognition. Technology, tanks, aircraft, is important, but not decisive alone. Soviet material advantages don't guarantee victory initially. The lesson: technology must be properly used. Must be supported by doctrine, tactics, leadership. The lesson: technology without doctrine fails. The offensive difficulty recognition. The Winter War demonstrates offensive warfare is difficult. Soviet attacks repeatedly fail, require constant reinforcement, require strategy change. The lesson: offense is harder than defense. Offense requires careful planning. The lesson: defense is naturally stronger than offense. The defensive advantage recognition. Defensive positions are inherently strong. The Mannerheim Line delayed Soviet advance for months. The lesson: defensive advantage is real, is significant. The lesson: defender has advantage unless attacker has overwhelming superiority. The reserve positioning importance. Mannerheim's positioning of reserves allows counterattacks. Reserves can be committed at crucial points. Reserves can block breakthroughs, can stabilize collapsing positions. The lesson: reserve positioning is crucial. Reserves are not merely backup. Reserves are active component of defense. The supply line vulnerability. The Raate Road Encirclement shows supply line vulnerability. Soviet 44th Division is destroyed when supply is cut. The lesson: supply lines are vulnerable, must be protected. The lesson: cutting enemy supply can determine outcome. On the propaganda value. The Winter War is propaganda victory for Finland. Finland's resistance becomes symbol of defiance. Propaganda has military impact, affects recruitment, affects morale. The lesson: propaganda is part of warfare, affects outcomes. The sniper's military importance. Simo Häyhä demonstrates sniper value beyond individual kills. Häyhä creates fear, forces Soviet forces to adopt defensive posture. Häyhä affects large-scale operations through individual actions. Snipers become recognized as important military asset. Sniper training. Sniper doctrine. Sniper units are created. The defending occupied territory principle. Finland demonstrates defending your homeland is powerful motivation. Finnish soldiers fight to defend homeland. Family's nation. Soviet soldiers fight as conscripts, without personal stake. The lesson: defending homeland creates superior motivation. The lesson: home field advantage is psychological advantage. The underestimation danger. Soviets underestimate Finland. Assume quick victory. The underestimation proves costly. The war lasts 105 days. Costs hundreds of thousands of casualties. The lesson: underestimating enemy is dangerous. Can lead to strategic failure. The lesson: intelligence assessment must be accurate. Overconfidence is dangerous. The persistence value. Soviet forces persist. Adapt, eventually succeed despite initial failure. The lesson: persistence matters. Continued effort eventually overcomes resistance. The lesson: first setback is not fatal. Adaptation and persistence can lead to eventual success. The Winter War could have gone differently if Mannerheim's strategy was different, if Soviet tactics had changed earlier, if Finnish reserves had failed. The lesson: history is not predetermined, contingency matters. The lesson: small differences can have large consequences. The Winter War becomes standard curriculum in military academies worldwide. Officers study the battle, study the tactics, study the strategy. The Winter War is example of defensive warfare, Motti tactics, sniper effectiveness, armor vulnerability, infantry importance, artillery dominance, leadership importance, morale significance. The Winter War is military school, teaching lessons that endure. The Winter War ends March 13, 1940, but the consequences extend far beyond March 1940. The consequences shape the next 5 years, shape World War II's entire trajectory. The Hitler observation. Hitler observes the Winter War carefully. Hitler's military intelligence reports to Hitler, Soviet army is weak. The reports claim, Soviet army struggled against small Finland. The reports claim, Soviet army is not as powerful as believed. Hitler believes the reports. Hitler is influenced by the reports. The German strategic calculation. Based on Winter War observations, Hitler recalculates Soviet strength. Hitler believes Soviet army can be defeated. Hitler believes Soviet Union can be conquered. Hitler believes quick victory is possible. The belief proves incorrect, but the belief exists. The belief influences Hitler's planning, influences Hitler's decision. The Operation Barbarossa decision. On June 22, 1941, 15 months after Winter War ends, Germany invades Soviet Union. Operation Barbarossa is the invasion, the largest military operation in history. The decision to invade is influenced by Winter War observations. The Winter War suggested Soviet army is beatable. The Winter War contributed to German decision to invade. The continuation war connection. Finland, resenting Winter War losses, sees opportunity in German invasion. Finland joins the war against Soviet Union. June 1941, the continuation war begins. Finland attempts to reclaim lost territories. The continuation war lasts until September 1944. The connection. Winter War resentment leads to continuation war. The Hitler's confidence increase. The Winter War increases Hitler's confidence in German military. If Soviet army struggled against Finland, Soviet army might be weak overall. Hitler believes German army will defeat Soviet army rapidly. The belief is incorrect. Soviet army is more powerful than Winter War suggests. But the belief motivates Hitler to invade. The Soviet military improvement. After Winter War, Soviet military makes improvements. Soviet generals, Timoshenko, Zhukov, implement reforms. Soviet tactics improve, Soviet training improves. Soviet doctrine improves. The improvements occur just in time. Before German invasion 15 months later, the improvements help Soviets survive German invasion. The Soviet purge consequences. The Winter War occurs during aftermath of Stalin's purges. Soviet officer corps has been decimated. Experienced officers executed. The purges hamper Soviet performance, contribute to Soviet military failures. By 1941, new officers are more capable. The purge damage is healing somewhat. The improvement in Soviet performance from Winter War to 1941 invasion is partly due to officer corps rebuilding. The German military observations. German military attachés provide detailed observations. German Army High Command OKW receives reports. The reports emphasize Soviet military weaknesses shown in Winter War. The reports underestimate Soviet capability, overestimate German capability. The misassessment contributes to Operation Barbarossa disaster. The international implications. The Winter War affects international perceptions. Finland is seen as victim as heroic small nation. Soviet Union is seen as aggressive, as powerful but not invincible. Germany is seen as alternative to Soviet threat. The perceptions influence international relationships. The Finnish-German alignment. The Winter War leads to Finnish-German alignment. Finland needs protection. Germany offers partnership. Finland fears Soviet power. Germany claims to oppose Soviet power. The partnership seems logical to Finnish leaders. But the partnership leads to complications. Complications lead to continuation war. Continuation war leads to Soviet retaliation. The Baltic states' fate. Determined. The Winter War's outcome influences Baltic states' fate. Soviet Union, gaining territory from Finland, becomes more aggressive. Soviet Union demands similar concessions from Baltic states. Baltic states, seeing Finland's fate, are pessimistic. But Baltic states cannot match Finland's resistance, are annexed. The Karelian question permanence. The Winter War creates Karelian question. Finns want to reclaim lost Karelia. Soviets will not return Karelia. The question creates permanent tension between Finland and Soviet Union. The question is never resolved. Remains unresolved today. The strategic position shift. The Winter War shifts strategic position in Northern Europe. Finland's losses improve Soviet strategic position. Soviet position closer to Europe. Soviet threat to Scandinavia increased. The shift influences future events. Influences Cold War. The Soviet expansion pattern. The Winter War begins pattern of Soviet expansion. Soviet Union gains territory from Finland. Soviet Union will gain territories from Poland, Eastern Poland in 1939. Soviet Union will gain territories from Romania, Bessarabia, Bukovina in 1940. The pattern suggests Soviet expansionism, suggests Soviet aggression. The continuation war, inevitability. The Winter War makes continuation war nearly inevitable. Finland loses territory. Finland resents loss. Finland sees Germany as ally. As protection against Soviet power, Finland joins German invasion of Soviet Union. The decision leads to consequences, leads to ultimate defeat. The post-war Finnish situation. After Woody ends, Finland faces Soviet power directly. Finland must accommodate Soviet demands. Soviet presence in Hanko Finland cannot resist alone. Must be careful, must be diplomatic. Finland develops Finlandization policy. Balance between East and West Finland survives. But under Soviet dominance, during Cold War. The long Cold War consequence. The Winter War sets stage for Cold War in Northern Europe. Finland is buffer state between Soviet Union and Western Europe. Finland remains independent, but is wary of Soviet power. The wariness is permanent, shapes Finnish foreign policy for 45 years. The Soviet sphere expansion. The Winter War is first step in Soviet sphere expansion. Soviet sphere eventually includes much of Eastern Europe. Soviet sphere is created through combination of military victory and post-war occupation. The Winter War is precedent. Soviet territory gains, Soviet sphere expansion. The military lessons application. The military lessons learned from Winter War are applied. By 1941, Soviet military has adapted based on Winter War lessons. Soviet combined arms doctrine is improved. Soviet tactics are better. Soviet training is better. The improvements help Soviets survive German invasion. Help Soviet eventually defeat Germany. The Western Allies observation. British and American observe Winter War. Western Allies draw lessons from Winter War. Western militaries study Finnish tactics, study defensive warfare. Some lessons are incorporated into Western military doctrine. The Mannerheim legacy extension. Marshal Mannerheim becomes international figure. Mannerheim's reputation extends beyond Finland. Mannerheim is recognized as military genius, strategic thinker. Mannerheim leads Finland through continuation war, negotiates peace. Mannerheim becomes president of Finland after WW2, guides Finland through Cold War. The Häyhä legacy. Simo Häyhä becomes legendary figure. The sniper called White Death is celebrated. Häyhä exemplifies Finnish courage, Finnish skill, Finnish determination. Häyhä's legend inspires, motivates, becomes part of Finnish national identity. On the Finnish national identity. The Winter War creates Finnish national identity. Finnish identity, small nation against odds. Resists, survives. Finnish identity, not conquered, not annexed, independent. Finnish identity, courageous, determined, skilled. The identity lasts, influences Finnish culture, influences Finnish policy. The David and Goliath endurance. The Winter War as David versus Goliath narrative endures. The narrative inspires. The narrative teaches lessons about resistance, about courage. The narrative is remembered, celebrated, taught to new generations. The narrative becomes part of world history, part of human history. The unresolved Karelian question legacy. The Karelian territories remain in Russian hands. After Soviet Union collapses, territories are not returned. Russian-Finnish border remains as established in Moscow Peace Treaty. The Karelian question remains symbol of Winter War, of losses, of uncompleted history. The Winter War's historical significance. The Winter War is significant because 1. It demonstrates small nation can resist large power too. It influences Hitler's decision to invade Soviet Union 3. It demonstrates value of defense, terrain, leadership, morale 4. It creates military lessons studied for decades 5. It affects course of WBOE 6. It affects course of Cold War 7. It shapes Finnish national identity 8. It inspires worldwide respect for Finnish courage. The Winter War is pivotal moment. Affects far more than just Finland. The Winter War is international turning point. The final assessment. The Winter War is triumph of human determination over material advantage. The Winter War is demonstration of tactical genius, strategic thinking, military skill. The Winter War is tragedy of war, of losses, of displaced persons. The Winter War is victory despite defeat, independence maintained despite losses. The Winter War ends with Finland surviving, nation intact, independence preserved. But the Winter War creates consequences, creates resentment, creates future conflicts. The Winter War is beginning, not ending, beginning of Soviet-Finnish tension. The tension will last 45 years, until Soviet Union collapses. The Winter War is historical milestone, is turning point in European history, is moment that changed world. The Winter War remains relevant, remains studied, remains remembered. The Winter War is Finland's finest hour.